He laughed in my face, mocking my accent right there in the boardroom. The cheap laughter from his crew crashed against my ears while I sat there, face cold, heart burning like fire. He thought power protected his arrogance. He didn't know he'd just crossed the only person who held the lifeblood of the entire corporation. And me, I didn't yell, didn't slam the table. I built a trap with clean lines of logic, legal clauses he never bothered to read. One wrong deployment, and his $89 million would turn to ash. My name is Sophia Miles, and I've been the lead systems engineer at Harper & Lynx Global Tech for 6 years. At 34, I'd built half the infrastructure that kept this company running, yet in that Tuesday morning strategy meeting, I might as well have been invisible. The conference room on the 42nd floor gleamed with morning sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. 23 executives sat around the obsidian table, and at its head, our new CEO, Marcus Harper, presided with his nephew, Evan Carter, seated at his right hand. Evan had been appointed Global Strategy Director just 3 weeks ago, fresh from his MBA at Wharton. His resume padded with 2 years at a boutique consulting firm his uncle's friend owned. I was presenting the technical requirements for our global expansion when it happened. My voice, carrying the faint traces of my Romanian accent despite 15 years in America, explained the cross-region fallback protocols. The system requires redundancy across 3 continents to ensure, maybe if you fixed your accent, the code wouldn't break. Evan interrupted, his nasal voice cutting through the room like a rusty blade. He turned to his cluster of junior executives, the ones he'd brought in from his consulting days, and they erupted in snickers. The room fell silent for a heartbeat. Some executives looked down at their tablets. Others glanced at me with a mixture of pity and second-hand embarrassment. Marcus Harper, our CEO, said nothing. His silence was louder than any reprimand could have been, not toward Evan, but toward me, marking me as someone whose humiliation didn't warrant intervention. I kept my expression neutral, my hands steady on the presentation clicker. Inside, something crystallized, hard and sharp as diamond. As I was saying, I continued, my voice level, the redundancy protocols are essential for the $89 million telecom contract. Evan leaned back in his Italian leather chair, that smirk still playing on his lips. That's exactly why we need to move fast. Cut the testing phases. Skip the bureaucratic checkpoints. We're not building a spaceship here, just a platform upgrade. The legal compliance alone requires, I started. Legal can catch up. He waved his hand dismissively. This is about being agile, revolutionary, something you old-school engineers wouldn't understand. Old school. I was 34. Marcus finally spoke. Evan has a point. We need to be first to market. The Europeans are ready to sign next month. I nodded slowly, gathering my materials. I'll need written authorization to bypass the standard protocols. Just get it done, Marcus said, already turning to his nephew to discuss their golf plans for the weekend. As I walked back to my desk on the 38th floor, past the rows of developers who'd heard about the meeting through the company's gossip network, I pulled up the technical documentation on my screen. 3 modules sat at the heart of our global deployment, and buried in the DevOps framework was something I'd insisted on 2 years ago, a copyright protection clause for proprietary logic. Any deployment using my code required my personal sign-off. It was legal, binding, and completely overlooked by executives who never read past page 3 of any technical document. I opened the security vault in our codebase and moved the critical modules inside, tagging them sensitive IP sign-off required. Then I drafted an email to Diana Rhodes in compliance, CCing our internal legal team, with a simple reminder about intellectual property protocols for global deployments: professional, procedural, invisible. Evan Carter thought he could humiliate me because I spoke with an accent, because I was a woman in tech, because his uncle's name was on the building. He was about to learn that in the digital age, power isn't about whose blood you share or which university's crest hangs on your wall. It's about who controls the code. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of false urgency. Evan strutted through the offices like a peacock, announcing daily countdown updates on the company Slack. T-minus 21 days to revolutionize global tech. His LinkedIn posts gathered thousands of likes from people who confused arrogance with vision. I spent those weeks doing what I do best, diving deep into code. Every night after the office emptied, I'd stay until 11:30 p.m., not to sabotage, but to understand. The deployment package Evan's team had assembled was a Frankenstein monster of shortcuts and assumptions. They'd ripped out 3 critical modules to streamline the process: the cross-region fallback system, the data integrity validator, and the latency optimizer. All 3 contained my proprietary algorithms. In our internal documentation system, buried under layers of technical specifications that no executive would ever read, I found what I was looking for. 2 years ago, when I developed these systems, I'd insisted on a protective clause standard in the industry, but rarely enforced. Section 7.4c of our intellectual property guidelines stated that any deployment utilizing engineer-authored proprietary logic required explicit written consent from the original developer. The company lawyers had approved it without question. It protected Harper & Lynx from potential IP disputes. Now it would protect the company from Evan's recklessness, though he didn't know it yet. I documented everything meticulously: screenshots of Evan's messages demanding we skip testing, records of meetings where he overrode security protocols, email chains where he dismissed my concerns as paranoid overthinking. Each piece of evidence went into a secured folder, time-stamped and hashed. Carl Whitman, our infrastructure lead, noticed the missing modules first. He cornered me by the coffee machine on a Thursday afternoon. His weathered face creased with concern. "Sophia, the deployment package is missing your fallback protocols. Evan's team says they're redundant." I stirred my coffee slowly. "They have written authorization to proceed without them." Carl's eyes narrowed. "You know they don't read the technical requirements." "Then I suggest you document that concern. Carl, for the record." He studied me for a long moment. Carl had been in tech for 20 years. He knew when something was brewing beneath the surface. "You've locked them in the security vault, haven't you? They're labeled as sensitive IP requiring sign-off. That's always been the protocol." A ghost of a smile crossed his lips. "And if someone deploys without that sign-off, then they're in violation of our IP agreement. But I'm sure Evan's revolutionary agile methodology accounts for such details." That evening, I sent another email to Diana Rhodes in compliance, this time with a more explicit warning. Upcoming global deployment may utilize protected IP without proper authorization. Please advise on liability implications. I attached the relevant sections of our IP guidelines, highlighting Section 7.4c in yellow. Diana responded within an hour. "Thank you for bringing this to our attention. Legal has been notified." Meanwhile, Evan scheduled a company-wide meeting for Friday at 3 p.m. to celebrate the imminent transformation of Harper & Lynx. He stood at the podium in the main auditorium, his pressed suit and practiced gestures trying to evoke Steve Jobs, but achieving only empty mimicry. "We're not just deploying code," he announced to the assembled employees. "We're deploying the future, and we're doing it faster than any company has dared before." From my seat in the back row, I watched him bask in manufactured applause. He mentioned the $89 million contract 4 times, each repetition designed to cement his legacy as the boy genius who saved Harper & Lynx from stagnation. He never mentioned the engineers whose work he was butchering, never acknowledged the security protocols he was bypassing, never admitted that his revolutionary approach was just recklessness dressed in Silicon Valley buzzwords. The trap was set. Every piece was legal, legitimate, documented. I hadn't sabotaged anything. I'd simply refused to authorize the theft of my own work. The beauty of it was that Evan had done all the damage himself, through arrogance and ignorance in equal measure. 3 days before the deployment, I submitted a formal request for time off on deployment night. "Family obligation," I wrote. My manager approved it without question. Let them launch their revolution. I'd be home, watching the inevitable unfold from a safe distance. My conscience clear and my code secure behind walls they'd built themselves. The Monday before deployment, Evan called another strategy meeting, This time, the board members were present via video conference, their faces arranged in neat squares on the wall-mounted screen. I sat 3 seats from the end, my laptop open to the deployment checklist that grew more alarming with each unchecked box. "Sophia," Evan's voice cut through the preliminary chatter. "Why don't you walk us through the technical readiness?" I stood, remote in hand. "We're at 60% completion on pre-deployment testing. The security audit is pending. Compliance has flagged several. We're not building a global product. We're building an ESL project," Evan interrupted, drawing out the letters ESL with theatrical disdain. The reference to English as a second language wasn't subtle. His cluster of junior executives laughed on cue, their sycophancy as predictable as their mediocrity. Marcus Harper chuckled from his seat. 2 board members smiled uncomfortably. The rest maintained professional facades, but nobody spoke up. Nobody ever did. I clicked to the next slide, my voice steady as granite. "The compliance flags are significant, without proper authorization protocols." "There she goes again with the protocols," Evan stage whispered to his nearest ally, loud enough for everyone to hear. "In America, we call it innovation. Maybe that doesn't translate well." The room felt smaller, the air thicker. I could have reported him to HR, could have made a scene, could have walked out. Instead, I did something far more devastating. I documented. "I'll send the board a comprehensive risk assessment by end of day," I said, returning to my seat. "No need," Marcus interjected. "Evan's team has it covered." That afternoon, I refined my strategy. In our project management system, I created a ticket marked critical but pending owner sign-off before global deployment. I assigned it to Evan's team, knowing they'd ignore it like they'd ignored every other warning. In the comments, I added a single line: "Deployment without authorization may trigger automatic rollback per security protocols." Carl found me in the server room that evening, running diagnostics on the backup systems. "They're really going through with it," he said, closing the door behind him. "No testing, no authorization, no safety net." "I've done everything required of me," I replied, checking the backup logs. "Every warning has been documented, every risk flagged." "That's not what I mean." Carl lowered his voice. "I checked the security vault. Your modules are locked tighter than Fort Knox. They can't deploy the full system without them." "They can deploy whatever they want, Carl. Whether it works is another matter." He studied the server racks, their blue lights blinking in hypnotic patterns. "You know what will happen when it fails." "I know what happens when intellectual property is used without authorization. The system has built-in protections. I didn't create them for this situation, but they exist nonetheless." Carl was quiet for a moment. "The European contract is contingent on successful deployment. Evan should have read the fine print." That night, I sent one final email to Diana Rhodes, copying the legal team and, crucially, the external audit committee. "For the record, I have not provided authorization for the use of proprietary modules in the upcoming global deployment. Any attempt to override security protocols without proper sign-off may result in system protection measures engaging automatically." Diana's response came at 11:45 p.m. Acknowledged and forwarded to General Counsel. Wednesday arrived with unusual fanfare. Evan had arranged for a camera crew to document the historic moment. He wore a new suit, his hair precisely styled, his confidence broadcasting from every pore. In the main conference room, he held court with the European partners via satellite link, promising them a seamless revolution in global connectivity. I wasn't invited to that meeting, but I didn't need to be. I could see everything from my desk through the glass walls, Evan gesticulating wildly, Marcus nodding approvingly, the European executives looking alternately impressed and skeptical. At 4:30 p.m., Evan strutted past my desk, his entourage in tow. "Enjoy your family obligation tomorrow night, Sophia," he said, his tone dripping condescension. "Some of us will be here making history." I looked up from my screen, meeting his gaze directly. History has a way of remembering details. Evan, every single one. He laughed, that sharp, dismissive sound that had echoed through too many conference rooms. Details are for people who can't see the big picture. As he walked away, I pulled up the security vault one last time. The modules sat there, protected by layers of authentication, waiting. The trap wasn't malicious code or hidden viruses. It was something far more elegant. It was the system working exactly as designed, protecting intellectual property exactly as specified, following every rule and regulation that Evan had chosen to ignore. Tomorrow night, while they celebrated their revolution, the very infrastructure of Harper & Lynx would teach them why details matter. Thursday night, deployment night, I sat in my apartment, laptop open on the coffee table, a glass of wine untouched beside it. The company Slack erupted with excitement photos from the war room, Evan posing with champagne bottles, countdown timers, and inspirational quotes about disruption and innovation. At 8 p.m. sharp, the deployment began. I watched through our monitoring dashboard, my credentials still valid despite my time off. The initial rollout looked smooth, servers spinning up across North America, green lights cascading across the status board. Evan's live stream to the European partners showed him confident, gesticulating at screens filled with metrics he didn't understand. 8:47 p.m. First yellow warning, a timeout in the Dallas data center. 9:15 p.m. Orange alerts in Seattle and Toronto, API responses slowing. 9:32 p.m. The European servers came online. That's when the symphony of failure truly began. Without the cross-region fallback protocol, data packets collided like trains on the same track. The system tried to compensate, but without the latency optimizer, requests piled up in massive queues. Error 502, error 504, then the death knell, error 403, forbidden. My phone vibrated. "Carl, it's happening." On Slack, panic replaced celebration. Evan's live stream showed him frantically gesturing at engineers, his face flushing red. Someone killed the external feed, but internal communications painted the picture clearly. European sync failing completely. Database locks everywhere. "We need to roll back now." That's when they discovered the elegant simplicity of my protection. The rollback command required accessing the core modules. The core modules were in the security vault. The security vault demanded authorization from the IP owner. The IP owner was sitting at home, watching their empire of arrogance crumble in real time. 10:12 p.m. Marcus Harper himself appeared in Slack. "Where is Sophia Miles?" HR dutifully noted I had approved time off. Family obligation. 10:28 p.m. Evan tried to override the security vault. Access denied. He tried administrator privileges. Access denied. He tried the CEO's credentials. Access denied. The system wasn't malfunctioning, it was protecting itself exactly as designed. Every attempt to bypass authorization was logged, time-stamped, and automatically reported to compliance. Diana Rhodes would have quite the reading material in the morning. 11 p.m. The European partners disconnected from the call. According to the frantic Slack messages, they were reassessing the partnership. 11:34 p.m. Complete system failure across all regions. The platform didn't just stop working, it locked itself down completely, entering protection mode when unauthorized access attempts exceeded threshold. My phone rang. "Carl?" "They're losing their minds here," he said, and I could hear shouting in the background. "Evan just threw a laptop." "Is anyone hurt?" "Only egos, and about $89 million worth of contract." I pulled up my email and composed a message to Diana Rhodes, copying legal and the board's audit committee. "I've been notified of ongoing deployment issues. As previously documented, I have not authorized the use of my proprietary modules. I am currently unavailable due to approved personal time off, but will be happy to discuss proper authorization protocols during business hours. Monday. Send." By midnight, the war room had devolved into chaos. According to the bits and pieces coming through Slack, Evan was screaming at engineers. Marcus was on damage control with the Europeans, and someone from legal was frantically searching through documentation. Then came the message that made everything worthwhile. Not from Evan or Marcus, but from James Morrison, the chairman of the board, directly to me. Ms. Miles, we need to discuss the deployment failure immediately. Please confirm your availability for an emergency board meeting. I waited exactly 15 minutes before responding. I have approved time off through the weekend. I can meet Monday at 9 a.m. Please have all technical documentation and authorization requests ready for review. My phone buzzed again, a text from an unknown number, but I recognized Evan's writing style immediately. You did this on purpose, you bitter buh. I screenshotted it before he could finish typing or delete it. Another piece of documentation for Monday's meeting. By 2 a.m., Harper & Link's Global Tech's revolutionary deployment had become a cautionary tale spreading through tech Twitter. Someone leaked that the company had attempted to deploy without proper authorization. Tech reporters smelled blood in the water. I closed my laptop, finally taking a sip of wine. Outside my window, the city continued its nighttime rhythm, unaware that in one gleaming tower downtown, an empire built on arrogance was discovering the price of dismissing details and the people who understand them. The real devastation wasn't the failed deployment. It was the paper trail showing that every single warning had been ignored, every protocol bypassed, every safety measure dismissed as unnecessary bureaucracy. Monday would bring reckoning, but tonight, I would sleep peacefully. Knowing that I hadn't destroyed anything, I had simply refused to save those who wouldn't save themselves. Friday morning arrived with a storm of notifications. I kept my phone on silent, but the screen lit up continuously missed calls from Marcus, from HR, from numbers I didn't recognize. I ignored them all. I had approved time off, and I intended to use it. Carl, however, I answered. Sophia, you need to know what's happening here, he said, his voice low and urgent. I'm in the server room. Been here since 3 a.m. What did you find? Everything. I've been going through the audit logs, tracing every step of last night's disaster. Your name is embedded in every critical function, not just as developer, as IP owner. The legal implications. He paused. It's beautiful, actually. Terrifying, but beautiful. I simply followed protocol, Carl. No, you did more than that. I found the compliance emails, the warnings, the documentation. Diana Rhodes has been here since 5 a.m. with 3 lawyers. They're building a timeline. In the background, I heard footsteps, voices. I have to go, Carl whispered. But Sophia, they know. They finally understand what Evan walked into. I spent Friday afternoon at a museum, wandering through exhibits of ancient civilizations that had collapsed through hubris. My phone battery died around 2 p.m. I didn't charge it. Saturday morning, I finally powered on my devices. 143 emails, 67 Slack messages, 23 missed calls, but one message stood out, sent at 11:59 p.m. Friday night from Diana Rhodes. Ms. Miles, following extensive review of Thursday's deployment failure, legal and compliance have identified multiple violations of IP protocols, specifically regarding Clause 7.4c of your employment agreement. We have documented 17 separate instances where Mr. Carter's team attempted to deploy your proprietary code without authorization. Furthermore, we have evidence of attempts to bypass security protocols after the failure occurred. The board has been fully briefed. Your presence is required at Monday's emergency meeting, not as a defendant, but as a key witness. Please confirm receipt. I confirmed receipt. Sunday evening, Carl called again. The board brought in external auditors, he said. They've been here all weekend. They found something else. Sophia. What? Evan's been falsifying deployment readiness reports. He marked testing phases as complete when they never started. He signed off on security audits that never happened. But here's the kicker: he used Marcus's digital signature, claimed he had verbal authorization. The implications were staggering. This wasn't just about my modules anymore. This was about systematic fraud. There's more, Carl continued. The European partners haven't just pulled out, they're considering legal action, breach of contract. The deployment failure exposed customer data. because Evan disabled the encryption protocols to speed things up. It's a GDPR nightmare. I sat in my apartment, looking out at the city lights, processing this information. I had set a trap for arrogance, but Evan had walked into a minefield of his own making. Carl, I need you to document everything you found. Create backups, multiple copies. Already done, Sophia. There's something else. The chairman of the board, Morrison, he's been investigating Marcus and Evan's relationship. Turns out, Evan's position wasn't just nepotism. Marcus has been funneling company resources to Evan's previous startup. They were planning to use the European deal to cover the losses. The corruption ran deeper than I'd imagined. My simple act of protecting my intellectual property had pulled a thread that was unraveling an entire web of deception. Monday morning, I arrived at the office at 8:45 a.m. The usually buzzing headquarters felt subdued, like a funeral home. Security guards stood at every entrance. I recognized two men in the lobby as federal investigators, their suits and bearing unmistakable. Diana Rhodes met me at the elevator. Sophia, before we go up, you need to know this is no longer just an internal matter. The SEC is involved. The FBI's white-collar crime division is here. Your documentation. Your refusal to authorize the deployment, it may have saved this company from a massive fraud scheme. I just wanted to protect my work, I said. You did more than that. You exposed something that could have destroyed Harper & Lynx entirely. The board is grateful, even if they can't say it yet. As we rode the elevator to the 45th floor, 3 levels above the usual executive suite, Diana handed me a folder. What's this? The real deployment statistics, the ones Evan never showed anyone. Without your modules, the system had a 0% chance of functioning. He knew it. He ran the simulations himself 3 weeks ago, then buried the results. The elevator doors opened to reveal a conference room I'd never seen before. Through the glass walls, I could see the board members, federal investigators, and in the corner, sitting alone with his lawyer, Evan Carter. His face was pale, his usual smirk replaced by something between fear and rage. Marcus Harper was notably absent. The boardroom felt arctic. James Morrison, chairman of the board, sat at the head of the table, his 70-year-old face carved from stone. To his right, 3 federal investigators. To his left, the remaining board members who'd flown in overnight. The general counsel, Patricia Winters, stood by a wall of documents, printed emails, contracts, technical specifications stacked like evidence in a murder trial. Ms. Miles, Morrison began, his voice carrying the weight of 40 years in business. Please walk us through the authorization protocols for your proprietary modules. I stood, remote in hand, and pulled up the first slide. 2 years ago, I developed 3 critical systems for Harper & Lynx: the cross-region fallback protocol, the latency optimizer, and the data integrity validator. As per standard practice, I registered these as proprietary intellectual property under Clause 7.4c of our engineering agreements. Which requires, Morrison prompted, my explicit written authorization for any deployment utilizing these modules. From across the room, Evan's lawyer whispered urgently in his ear. Evan's face flushed deeper red. And did Mr. Carter request this authorization? Patricia Winters asked. No. He stated that legal requirements were, quote, bureaucratic obstacles to innovation. I clicked to the next slide, a screenshot of Evan's Slack message dismissing my concerns. One of the federal investigators, Agent Sarah Coleman, leaned forward. Ms. Miles, were you aware that proceeding without your authorization would cause system failure? I was aware it would trigger our standard IP protection protocols. These aren't punitive measures, they're designed to prevent unauthorized use of proprietary code. The system behaved exactly as documented. She sabotaged us, Evan exploded, shooting to his feet. His lawyer grabbed his arm, but Evan shook him off. She knew what would happen and said nothing. Morrison's gaze could have frozen hellfire. Mr. Carter, you'll have your opportunity to speak. Sit down. I pulled up the next slide, my email trail to Diana Rhodes, to legal, to compliance. I documented my concerns 17 times over 3 weeks. Every warning was ignored or dismissed. Patricia Winters lifted a folder. Mr. Carter, did you see these warnings? They were technical noise. Sophia always complained about protocols. Did you or did you not receive an email specifically stating that deployment without authorization would violate IP agreements? Evan's lawyer whispered urgently. Evan mumbled, I may have received something. Agent Coleman interjected. We've recovered deleted emails from Mr. Carter's account. Ms. Miles, are you aware that Mr. Carter instructed his team to, quote, ignore the bitter immigrant's paranoia? The room went silent. Even Evan's lawyer looked disgusted. I was not aware of that specific message, I replied evenly. Morrison turned to the board. Let me be clear about what happened here. Mr. Carter attempted to deploy $89 million worth of infrastructure without proper authorization, without testing, and without regard for legal protocols. When it failed as it was designed to when accessed improperly, he attempted to illegally breach our security systems. Diana Rhodes stood. There's more. Our investigation revealed Mr. Carter has been falsifying reports for 2 months, test completions that never happened, security audits that were never performed. He used CEO Marcus Harper's digital signature without authorization. Where is Marcus? One board member asked. Mr. Harper submitted his resignation at 6 a.m. this morning, Morrison replied. He is currently cooperating with federal investigators regarding potential securities fraud. The weight of that statement hung in the air. Marcus Harper, the CEO who'd protected his nephew's arrogance, was gone. Morrison continued. The European partners are seeking $120 million in damages. Our stock has dropped 31%. We're facing 3 federal investigations. He looked directly at Evan. All because you thought you were above the rules. Evan's lawyer finally spoke. My client was acting under the belief that rapid deployment was in the company's best interest. Your client, Patricia Winters responded, violated 17 federal regulations, 3 international trade agreements, and exposed our company to catastrophic liability. His rapid deployment has cost us a minimum of $200 million in immediate losses, with potential criminal charges pending. Agent Coleman added, Mr. Carter, you should know that attempting to access secured systems after being denied authorization constitutes attempted corporate espionage under federal law. Evan's face went white. Morrison turned back to me. Ms. Miles, the board has questions about your actions. My stomach tightened. Why? He asked. Did you not escalate this to the board directly when your warnings were ignored? I followed proper channels. I reported to compliance, to legal, to my direct management. I documented everything. Going directly to the board would have violated reporting structure, another protocol Mr. Carter might have called bureaucratic. A ghost of a smile crossed Morrison's lips. Indeed, Ms. Miles, would you have authorized the deployment if properly requested? Not without complete testing, security audits, and legal clearance. The timeline Mr. Carter proposed was impossible without compromising system integrity. Which is exactly what a competent engineer should say, Morrison replied. He looked around the table. Board members, I believe we've heard enough. The vote was unanimous. Evan Carter was terminated immediately, with criminal charges to be determined by federal investigators. All his previous decisions were under review. The entire deployment team leadership was suspended pending investigation. As security escorted Evan out, he stopped near my chair, his face twisted with rage. You destroyed everything! I met his eyes calmly. No, Evan, you destroyed everything. I just didn't save you from yourself. The aftermath unfolded with surgical precision. Tuesday morning, I received a formal letter from my attorney, not the company's legal team, but my own, whom I'd quietly retained 2 weeks prior when I'd seen the writing on the wall. Sophia, she said over the phone, Harper and Lynx's legal department has been in touch. They're not pursuing any action against you. In fact, they're terrified you might sue them for hostile work environment and discrimination. That ESL comment, The bitter immigrant email, that's a lawsuit worth millions. I don't want their money, I replied. Then what do you want? I thought about it. I want my work protected, and I want this to mean something. Wednesday brought the public announcement. Harper & Lynx. Global Tech's stock plummeted another 15% as news broke of the failed deployment and federal investigation. Tech blogs dissected the disaster with surgical glee. How arrogance killed an $89 deal, read one headline. The nephew who crashed a tech giant, read another. But I wasn't celebrating. I was working rebuilding the deployment package properly, with full testing protocols, proper documentation, and every safety measure Evan had stripped away. Carl worked beside me, along with a small team of engineers who'd survived the purge. Thursday afternoon, Diana Rhodes visited my desk. The European partners are willing to renegotiate, she said, but they have conditions. Let me guess they want assurance this won't happen again. They want you to personally oversee the deployment. I looked up from my screen. They want me. By name, apparently, word has spread about who actually built the systems and who protected the company from a catastrophic breach. They trust you. The irony was delicious. The woman whose accent Evan had mocked was now the only person who could salvage his deal. I'll do it, I said, but I have conditions. Friday, I presented those conditions to the emergency board meeting. Morrison presided again, but this time, the atmosphere was different, respectful, almost deferential. First, I began, all deployments must follow the complete testing protocol, no exceptions, no matter who requests it. Agreed, Morrison said immediately. Second, I want Carl Whitman as co-lead on the European deployment. He's the only other person who fully understands the architecture. Done. Third, I want a new IP agreement that explicitly protects all engineers' proprietary work, with automatic criminal prosecution clauses for unauthorized use. Patricia Winters nodded. We'll draft it immediately. And finally, I said, meeting each board member's eyes, I want a written apology from this board for allowing a hostile work environment to persist, not just to me, but to every engineer who was dismissed, mocked, or marginalized for actually doing their job. The room fell silent. This was the dangerous request, the one that admitted institutional failure. Morrison spoke slowly. Ms. Miles, you're asking the board to accept responsibility for Marcus Harper and Evan Carter's actions. I'm asking the board to acknowledge that they knew Evan was unqualified and hostile, yet allowed him to continue because of his relationship to the CEO. Your silence in that meeting where he mocked my accent was complicity. One board member, Margaret Liu, spoke up. She's right. We all knew. We chose comfort over integrity. The vote was harder this time, but it passed 5-2. Over the weekend, I worked 18-hour days with Carl and the team, rebuilding everything Evan had destroyed. We restored the cross-region fallback protocols, implemented the latency optimizers, and added new security layers that would prevent any future cowboy from attempting what Evan had tried. Monday morning, 1 week after the boardroom confrontation, we were ready. The deployment began at 9 a.m. sharp, with the European partners watching via secured connection. Every module initialized perfectly, every security check passed, every region synced flawlessly. By noon, Harper & Lynx Global Tech had successfully deployed the infrastructure Evan had promised, but could never deliver. The European partners signed the contract not for $89 million, but for $93 million, with additional provisions for ongoing oversight. As I watched the final confirmations roll in, my phone buzzed. A news alert. Evan Carter indicted on federal fraud charges. Below it, another former Harper & Lynx CEO, Marcus Harper, reaches plea deal with federal prosecutors. Carl appeared at my desk with 2 cups of coffee. You did it. We did it, I corrected. No, he said firmly. You stood up when everyone else bowed down. You protected the company from itself. That afternoon, Morrison called me to his office. The board has approved a new position, he said. Chief Technology Ethics Officer, reporting directly to the board, with veto power over any deployment that violates protocols. That's a position that shouldn't need to exist, I replied. You're right, but it does need to exist, and you're the only person who's earned it. I accepted, but not for the title or the substantial raise that came with it. I accepted because I knew there would be other Evans, other Marcus Harpers, other rooms full of people too comfortable to speak up when someone was being degraded. The next time someone mocked an accent, dismissed expertise, or tried to bypass the people who actually built the systems they wanted to exploit, they would find me standing in their way. Not with malice, but with meticulous documentation and unbreakable protocols. 6 months later, I stood in my new corner office on the 43rd floor, rain streaming down the floor-to-ceiling windows. The nameplate on my door read, Sophia Miles, Chief Technology Ethics Officer. But titles weren't what I thought about as I watched the city blur through the water. Evan Carter was serving 3 to 5 years in federal prison. The trial had been swift, the evidence overwhelming. His attempts to blame me, to claim entrapment, had fallen apart when prosecutors presented his deleted emails, his falsified reports, his systematic deception. The moment that sealed his fate was when they played audio from the war room, Evan screaming obscenities, demanding engineers break federal law to access my secured modules. Marcus Harper had negotiated better 18 months minimum security, millions in fines, and a lifetime ban from serving as an officer in any public company. His empire of nepotism had crumbled in weeks. But I wasn't thinking about them either. My phone buzzed. A message from Carl. New deployment just passed all protocols. Clean sweep. The team wanted you to know. The team, 23 engineers who'd survived the purge and rebuild. We'd hired 17 more, including 5 who'd been previously rejected by Evan for not fitting his culture. 3 women, 2 immigrants like me, all brilliant, all previously dismissed for the wrong reasons. A knock on my door interrupted my thoughts. Diana Rhodes entered with someone I didn't recognize, a young woman, maybe 25, nervous energy radiating from her slight frame. Sophia, this is Jennifer Park, our new junior systems engineer. She requested to meet you. Jennifer stepped forward, her voice careful but determined. Ms. Miles, I wanted to thank you. What you did standing up when they mocked you, it matters. I've been in 3 companies where I was told my ideas were too aggressive for someone like me. After reading about what happened here, I finally understood it wasn't about my ideas. I gestured for her to sit. It never is about the ideas. Jennifer, it's about power and who's allowed to wield it. How did you stay so calm when he mocked your accent, when they all laughed? I turned from the window, really looking at her, seeing myself 7 years ago, fresh-faced and believing that hard work alone would be enough. I wasn't calm, I admitted. I was calculating. Every insult became evidence. Every dismissal became documentation. I turned their weapons into my tools. Jennifer nodded slowly. The board's apology letter, we all got copies. Some people think it was just PR. Maybe it was, I said. But it's also a legal document. The next time someone faces discrimination here, that letter is precedent. That's how you build protection, one document, one protocol, one precedent at a time. After she left, I returned to my desk where the latest project awaited a complete overhaul of Harper & Lynx's deployment protocols, now being adopted as industry standard. Tech conferences invited me to speak about the Milwaukee incident, as the trade press had dubbed it. I declined most invitations. The work mattered more than the spotlight. That evening, as I prepared to leave, my computer chimed with a notification from LinkedIn. Against my better judgment, I looked. It was Evan Carter's profile, updated from federal prison with a single post reflecting on past mistakes and the importance of respecting expertise regardless of its source. Corporate rehabilitation speak, probably written by his lawyer, but below it, hundreds of comments from engineers sharing their own stories, mocked accents, dismissed ideas, credit stolen by those who looked the part but couldn't do the work. I closed the laptop without responding. Evan's hollow words didn't matter. What mattered was the new deployment running flawlessly across 17 countries, the team that built it properly, and the protocols that would protect the next engineer who dared to stand up. My phone rang, an unknown international number. Ms. Miles. This is Friedrich Zimmermann from Deutsche Telekom. We've been following your work. We have a €500 million project that needs someone who understands both technology and integrity. Would you consider consulting? I smiled. The first genuine smile in months. Send me the specifications. If you're willing to follow proper protocols, we can discuss it. After ending the call, I stood by the window one more time. The rain had stopped, and the setting sun painted the city in shades of gold and shadow. Somewhere out there, in other gleaming towers, other Evans were mocking other Sophias. But now those Sophias had a blueprint not for revenge, but for justice delivered through meticulous preparation and unshakable protocols. I gathered my things, leaving the office that had once witnessed my humiliation and now bore witness to my vindication. In the elevator, I thought about that moment 6 months ago when Evan had laughed at my accent, when the room had stayed silent, when I decided that silence would be their undoing. He'd been right about one thing: I did have an accent. It was the accent of someone who'd learned English as a second language, who'd worked twice as hard to be heard half as clearly, who'd built systems that privileged boys could only pretend to understand. And in the end, that accent had spoken the only language that mattered in corporate America: documented, legally binding, irrefutable truth. The elevator opened to the marble lobby where a new portrait hung the entire engineering team, with Carl and me in the center. The plaque below read, "Excellence has no accent. Integrity needs no translation." I walked out into the evening air, my phone buzzing with messages from engineers around the world who'd found courage in my story. Each message was a reminder that what happened in that boardroom wasn't just about one woman's revenge or one arrogant man's downfall. It was about changing the very architecture of power, one perfectly documented protocol at a time. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where in the world you're listening from. Drop a comment below and let's connect. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. Have you ever faced a similar situation in your workplace? How did you handle it? Your stories matter too, and I'd love to hear them in the comments below.